1/5 of the world's oil squeezes through a strait 21 miles wide, and Iran controls an entire shore. That's not a coincidence. It's a trigger mechanism. So how does a regional conflict there end up raising grocery prices in Chicago or idling factories in Tokyo? The answer involves a chain reaction most people aren't watching. This is how war with Iran could crash economies far beyond the Middle East. At its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz measures just 21 miles across, a tight corridor hemmed in by Iran to the north and Oman to the south. Within this slim passage, two shipping lanes only 2 miles wide carry the world's energy lifeblood. Every day, about 20 million barrels of oil, roughly 1/5 of global consumption, move through these lanes. That's not just crude. Liquefied natural gas from Qatar and condensate from the UAE add to the flow, with nearly 3,000 vessels making the transit each month. For many Gulf exporters, this is the only way out. Nearly 90% of Iraq's oil exports, 80% from Kuwait and the UAE, and almost all of Iran's own crude must pass through Hormuz. Saudi Arabia, the region's heavyweight, relies on the strait for more than 1/3 of its exports, even with pipelines that can bypass the bottleneck in a pinch. The geometry is unforgiving. Water depths are just enough for the world's largest tankers, but there is little room for error. International maritime rules keep northbound and southbound ships separated by a slim buffer, but everyone is squeezed into the same channel. This is not just a busy highway, it is a single point of failure for the global energy system. If something slows or threatens traffic here, there is no quick detour. That's why every shipper, insurer, and energy analyst watches Hormuz with the same question in mind. How much risk is too much for the world to bear? And what happens when even a small disruption ripples outward? A single mine or missile strike in the Strait of Hormuz doesn't have to sink a tanker to send shockwaves through the market. When naval mines are reported, ships slow to a crawl, waiting for clearance. Even a handful of mines can force maritime authorities to close off sections for days, shrinking the safe passage and causing queues that snake back into Gulf ports. Tanker captains, facing radio warnings or the threat of anti-ship missiles, may choose to wait at anchorages or reroute entirely. This hesitation alone can cut daily throughput by 5 to 10%, with millions of barrels held back, not by a blockade, but by uncertainty and risk calculations. Missile and drone attacks, even when unsuccessful, push insurers to hike war risk premiums overnight. Some owners pull their vessels from service, refusing Hormuz-bound contracts until the threat level drops or governments step in with military escorts. Others accept the risk, but only at sharply higher rates, and pass those costs down the chain. Mines and drones aren't the only tools. Iran's naval forces have repeatedly used speedboats and radio threats to slow traffic, issuing standby orders that force ships into holding patterns. In a narrow 2-lane corridor, every hour of delay compounds, creating a traffic jam that ripples out to oil terminals across the Gulf. For charterers and ship owners, the decision to pause or proceed isn't just about safety. It's about whether they'll be able to ensure the voyage, find a willing crew, or secure a buyer for delayed cargo. The result, even a partial disruption, with no formal closure, can throttle the world's energy artery and inject a costly risk premium into every barrel moving through Hormuz. The market doesn't wait for a full shutdown. Just the credible threat is enough to start the dominoes falling. So how does this fear premium leap from the Gulf to your fuel bill? That's where history offers some sharp lessons. When oil stops flowing smoothly through the Gulf, markets do not just react, they remember. Economists point to the oil shocks of the 1970s as proof that perception can be just as powerful as reality. In October 1973, Arab OPEC members cut exports in response to the Yom Kippur War, trimming global supply by less than 10%. Yet the price of oil did not just rise, it quadrupled, jumping from $3 a barrel to $12 a barrel in a matter of months. Gas lines snaked through American cities, while inflation and job losses spread across Europe and Japan. The world learned that even a partial disruption could send ripples across every sector, from transport to food to manufacturing. 6 years later, the Iranian Revolution sent another shockwave. This time, the immediate loss was about 1 million barrels per day, only a fraction of global output. Still, panic took hold. Oil shot from $13 a barrel to $30 a barrel, more than doubling in less than a year. The real pain was not just at the pump. Factories slowed, unemployment rose, and central banks scrambled to contain double-digit inflation. The lesson economists draw from these crises is clear. Uncertainty itself becomes a price. When buyers cannot predict tomorrow's supply, they bid up today's barrels, and that premium seeps into every corner of the economy. Even when the physical shortage is small, the market's fear can do outsized damage. That is why analysts still talk about the fear premium, the extra cost baked in whenever the world's energy arteries look threatened. The next question is how today's tightly connected infrastructure could magnify these old lessons. Oil isn't just shipped out of the Gulf, it's processed there too, in a cluster of massive refineries and export terminals that are tightly packed around the Strait of Hormuz. About 70% of the region's refining capacity sits within 300 kilometers of this narrow waterway. Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura, the United Arab Emirates' Fujairah, and Kuwait's Al Zour complex all operate in this zone, making them tempting targets in any conflict. When the Abqaiq facility in Saudi Arabia was hit by drones and missiles in 2019, the world lost 5% of its oil supply overnight. Brent crude rose by $7 to $8 a barrel in just 2 days, and the downstream effect was immediate. Gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel prices jumped across continents. Most people do not think about where their fuel is refined, but this kind of concentration means a single strike can ripple into every gas station, airport, and delivery truck on the planet. The shock does not stop at the pump. When crude prices rise, so do the costs of plastics, fertilizers, and even electricity in places that rely on oil or gas-fired power. Central banks track these moves closely because energy costs make up a big chunk of the consumer price index. The numbers are clear. Every 10% rise in oil prices typically adds 1 to 3% to headline inflation within a few months. That is a direct hit to household budgets, especially for lower-income families who spend more on transport and food. The 2019 Abqaiq attack proved that even a brief disruption can send a shockwave through global markets. But what happens when the problem is not just a refinery outage but a supply chain that is forced to reroute overnight? That is where the next link in the chain comes into play. When tankers bypass the Strait of Hormuz, the detour is not just a line on a map. It is a journey that stretches an extra 15,000 nautical miles around the Cape of Good Hope. Each rerouted voyage adds roughly 2 weeks and drives up freight rates by 10 to 15%, as shippers scramble for limited capacity. For container lines, these delays ripple into higher costs for everything from electronics to car parts. The immediate impact is not limited to the oil market. Investors watch the Chicago Board Options Exchange Volatility Index, called VIX, for early warning signs. During recent Gulf escalations, the VIX has jumped 5 to 10 points within days, reflecting a rush to hedge against sudden swings. Shipping companies face tough choices: pay up for insurance, reroute and accept higher costs, or risk delays that jam up global supply chains. When freight costs spike, the price of moving goods rises across the board, including fuel, food, and finished products. The pain does not stop at the port. It lands in stores and on balance sheets worldwide. And for economies that rely on Gulf energy, the next link in the chain is even more exposed. Asia sits at the center of the energy domino. China alone imports around 12 million barrels of oil per day, over half its total supply, from the Gulf, while India, Japan, and South Korea together depend on the same region for much of their fuel. When flows through Hormuz slow or stall, these economies face immediate choices: pay more, scramble for alternative suppliers, or cut back on output. A 15% jump in oil prices can trim nearly half a point off China's gross domestic product growth and squeeze manufacturing margins across Asia. But the shock doesn't stop at the refinery gate. Sanctions amplify the pain. If US or EU authorities expand SWIFT bans or block dollar clearing for Iranian-linked cargoes, Asian refiners suddenly face higher transaction costs and longer payment delays. Some banks may refuse to process any trade with a whiff of Iranian exposure, forcing buyers to hunt for more expensive, less reliable sources. The result is a feedback loop with higher prices, tighter credit, and slower growth, and this can turn a regional flashpoint into a worldwide slowdown. For global banks and policymakers, the real risk isn't just lost barrels, but the way overlapping shocks can tip the system from strain to crisis. Right now, nearly 20% of the world's oil moves through a corridor narrower than Manhattan. As global supply chains tighten and energy prices remain volatile, a single regional spark could trigger worldwide shockwaves. The true risk isn't just disruption, it's how fast uncertainty travels. What do you think?